apart from European politics, what else might be in the way of a swift offshore wind energy development? And to talk about that, I'd like to ask Lars Holm to join me on stage. If you could come up here, that would be great. Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to change sides. So you are partner and director at Boston Consulting Group. And you think that there are some underlying flaws in the market, and that's also why several auctions were recently, in the past few months, cancelled or attracted no bids, like in the US and the UK.
Indeed, indeed. In my role as an expert in the Boston Consulting Group, we're working with players along the full value chain. And whenever I read headlines in the newspaper saying, the supply chain is not delivering, and that's why the industry is slowing down, then I wonder who the heck wrote that article. Because the supply chain is actually delivering. The supply chain is working as good as any supply chain can work. But there are some underlying flaws that you just mentioned. And these flaws are not flaws of the industry, but flaws of the system around the industry in which they're operating. Now, I don't want to smoothen over the problems we've seen at OEMs in scaling up their turbines, in serial defects, and so on. But the underlying problem is that when we talk about offshore auctions, they are a very specific animal. Let's compare that to an auction that you see at Sotheby's, where you can buy a Picasso. Very clear deal. There's the painting. Who is going to give most for the painting? Okay, 3 million, 4 million over there. Take home the painting, it's yours. Very simple process. This is not the case in wind. In wind, you're not buying the right to build something tomorrow. You're buying the option that you can, when the site is ready, when the interconnection is there, when you've got the environmental permits, when you have the concessions, then maybe you can build in 5 or in 10 years. Now, what does that mean? It basically means you're not at Sotheby's, but you're in Monaco, you're in the casino. You're buying something where you don't know what the value will be in the future. Well, you know what income you will have because you're buying or you're in the auction getting a feed-in tariff, but you don't know what your cost structure will be. In 5, 10 years down the road, it may be a totally different wind turbine. The material costs may have changed. Steel price has gone through the roof. Interest rates have changed. So you don't know your cost basis. And if you don't know your cost basis, you're making a bet on the future. And the further away the future, the bigger the bet. And this is what went wrong in the US, this is what went wrong in the UK. This bet did not materialize, or the risks materialized actually. And that's why the auctioneers had to give back their bids that they won. There's another fundamental difference to Sotheby's. In Sotheby's, I'm selling my Picasso, I want to get the money, clear deal, thank you very much. Here, if the French government or the UK government is making an auction, what is it that they want? Do they want the money from the developer? Or do they want the megawatt hours to supply the consumers? Or do they want the green element of that and to facilitate their energy transition? So what is the motive behind that? And typically it's a blend of these three, plus we want local jobs, we want local tax income, so it's a combination of those things. And that creates a quite diluted picture. And that is why governments are very unhappy if an auction is being returned. Now I told you how it's flawed. So the auction system is flawed. Right. Probably your next question will be, well, how can you
solve the issue,
how can you resolve it? And well, how can you resolve it? After laying out where the problem is, the big time difference between the auction and the building of the wind farm, there are two things you can do. You can start employing a lot of lawyers and building bridges between these two. You can say, well, you win a prize for the energy and that will be indexed. It will be indexed to inflation, to steel, to labor, to, I don't know. You can think of probably 50 components. You can make a very complicated contract, and that would be a bridge. But it doesn't have the technology dimension to it. It cannot have the demand and supply dimension to it. So it will be an incomplete bridge. The other thing you could do is you could bring the auction point in time and the construction, the FID point in time, closer together. And then you wouldn't be in Monaco, in the casino, but you would be in the industry game. You would win an auction, and shortly afterwards you could make FID and you could come to construction. Not super simple, but that would require two things. One is politicians have to restrain themselves. That's difficult. 2023 we had 2 auctions in Germany, and the politicians declared victory. Now we have something that is going to be built in 2031. Hurrah. Well, or maybe not. Maybe Total is going to return the options that they won, so you never know. But they declared victory. So, number one is politicians have to restrain themselves and wait with the auctions until they have something they can really sell. They have an internet, a grid connection, and they have a project you can build in a short time frame. The second thing is you need to have a visibility on the supply chain, and that means the companies that participate in the auction need to have prepared themselves, need to work with the OEMs to have contracts in place which they can execute upon in the near future. My gut feeling, offshore wind, 2 years between winning the auction and having FID would be a reasonable point in time. So, industry part and politicians part.
Is there any country that's doing that already, that's showing us the way?
Well, I think we have the Netherlands, which have just successfully auctioned 2 projects of 2 gigawatts each. Here you have construction coming up very fast, so that would be a good example. You're not just getting the right to build, but you have a framework. It used to be relatively simple, it's getting more complicated. You now have to build floating offshore PV, 50 megawatts, that's going to be a challenge. You have to build storage, you have to build underwater islands for the fish, but at least you can execute upon industrial patterns. So yes, Netherlands for me would be an example of where you can execute fast.
We're going to talk about that later on today and tomorrow. Thank you very much, Lars Holm from Boston Consulting Group, for coming to join us here at Seanergy.
Let's have a lot of good auctions coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.